Hey there YouTubers, Enduro Bandit coming at you on the tube today with a full review of the 2022 Kawasaki KLX300R. After one season of riding, I've put it through the paces. I've done a wide variety of riding with it, so I know how the bike handles lots of different kinds of terrain and types of riding. I've done single track, side-by-side trails, lots of gnarly hill climbs, high speed stuff on the FSRs. And I did a backpacking trip with it, carrying a 65-liter pack over all kinds of terrain, and bike handled it great. So as you can see, I've done lots of upgrades to the bike already, so I'll cover those along the way. And let's get right into it. Starting off with the bars. Obviously these aren't the stock ones, they lasted about 3 rides. The stock bars are quite tough, but they weren't tough enough. And Renthal bars live up to their reputation, taking the hard hits. These are the 7/8 inch Ricky Carmichael bend bar from Renthal. The stock bars, they're not wide open on the ends like most bars are, and most people don't like that, but I like that because then I could tap into the, I could make a thread for the bolts for my bark busters and directly bolt them in there, which is a little more firm than the inserts that bark busters come with. So I recommend upgrading your bars. May as well just wait till your stock ones are bent up from wiping out. I don't just putt around. I'm actually, pushing the bike a bit, and I like to challenge myself. And so obviously the bike's gonna take some spills, and when this bike goes down, it goes down pretty hard because it is a pretty heavy bike. So yeah, the frame on this bike is made of mostly steel. The swing arm is aluminum apparently, so that adds to the weight of the bike, but that's part of that lower price point. Kawasaki trying to give you a lower price point to afford a nice dirt bike. It's a very capable dirt bike. I wouldn't recommend it for black diamond trails, stuff like that. It can do it if you're a really good rider, but you're gonna be pushing the bike quite hard, pushing near the maximum of what it's capable of. The weight is working against it on some of the hill climbs, like the stuff with loose soil. I think you need to have a different rear tire for that. Also, it doesn't have a very wide rear tire. Compared to most full-size bikes, it's a little bit skinnier size of tire. But, can't complain. It still does everything I ask of it. I didn't buy this bike for doing black diamond trails. It's not for expert riders. If you're an expert rider, you're not even looking at these basically. But I'm a advanced intermediate rider. I like riding my YZ250X, and so I've got the bases covered here, and I really enjoy riding this bike. It's really fun on single track. It feels lighter than it is once you have it moving. It weaves around on that stuff, no problem. You don't even feel the weight of it when you're moving. So you feel the weight when you're, picking up the bike, when you're holding it up on a gnarly terrain. Say somehow you stall it on a hill climb, you're probably going to feel the weight of it. But that's where the electric start comes in. You don't have to kick start it. It doesn't even come with a kick start, which I was a little disappointed about that at first, but I don't mind it now because I haven't had one issue with the electric start on this bike. It's made right. As you can see, I've installed a UFO Ghibli headlight on this thing. Very happy with that. Got a light switch here to control it. I've also got rid of the push button start and replaced it with a keyed ignition. I've got a tutorial on how to do that along with the headlight and the pair valve delete. So it has a couple of lights here, one for low fuel and one for check engine light. And the fuel on this bike will go between 3 and 3.5 hours on a tank, depending how hard you're riding. Tank's about the same size as my YZ250X, so relatively small, but since it's a 4-stroke, goes a little longer than a 2-stroke, obviously. So throttle response isn't great on this bike, especially compared to my YZ250X, which is like as good as it gets. So it's a bit of a jump. But this bike, it pulls like a tractor. You can start it from a dead stop in second gear. You don't have to even work the clutch hard to get it moving. Like you're just a little more careful with it starting, and it'll crawl, it'll go. The YZ, you're gonna work the heck out of the clutch to start that thing in second, but then again, it does have taller gears, which is another nice thing about this bike, is it has a really nice gear ratio. I'm really happy with the stock gear ratio on this bike. No intentions of changing it. You know, the gears aren't too tall, they're not too short. So some people still like to shorten the gears, and other people like to make them taller, but for me, this bike definitely doesn't have enough power stock to be giving it taller gears. Instead, you want to give it more power by adding a chip tuner that'll plug right in. You can get them from EJK or DynoJet. They sell a nice one. I'm going with the EJK one. That's one thing I'm looking forward to for next year. It'll help richen up the fuel mixture, because stock they're too lean, and also that will help with the longevity of your engine, and it'll help your header to not run so hot. Also with the pair valve delete, that'll really help cool off your header, because it's part of the California emissions thing. That's just how they made all the KLX300Rs for North America. Same with the 300 SMs, thanks to California. So get rid of that emissions crap, because it's cycling more air into your exhaust and making it really hot. And I actually burned right through my dirt bike pants with that in like 2 seconds when I was pushing the bike, and I was up against some trees, and it leaned up against that header for a couple seconds, melted right through, gave me a burn. So if the bike were to lay on you with the header resting on your leg or something, you would get some 3rd-degree burns. So that's an upgrade you want to do fairly quickly on this bike before it causes an injury or something. So the bark busters on mine, they're MSR with Moose Racing plastics. These ones I've had for well over 10 years now, I think. And they've been holding up really well. I had them on the Geo, and then I just bought green plastics from Moose Racing to suit this bike. So the brakes, can't complain. For the price range, they're all you need. I mean, if you're used to, you know, the best possible brakes out there, they're going to be a bit of a jump, because they're not quite as responsive. I did some adjusting on the brakes after I bought the bike from the dealer, because they felt a little loose, and I made them a little more responsive anyway. You can do some tweaking. As you can see, the grips, I've upgraded to Pro Taper pillow top. I always do that right away when I buy a bike, and you know, very happy with those. They reduce cramping and stuff. I really can't handle stock grips on bikes. It just cramps up my knuckles and hands so bad. So the clutch, it feels really good. Can't complain. It's not hydraulic, but I mean, I'm really happy with it, and it works really smoothly. So as good as anything that isn't hydraulic anyway. So no complaints there. Working our way down. Front suspension, you know, it's about as good as you can get for the price range. Not quite as long travel as most full-size bikes. The full suspension on this bike is KYB. It's not quite as long travel, like I said. We're talking about the full rear and front fork suspension. It's almost fully adjustable, except for that the front forks don't have the top clickers, which isn't a big deal to me, because I'm not racing the bike or anything. So happy with the suspension. Wouldn't recommend for any jumps, you know, larger than a meter of air, because then you're going to be bottoming out pretty hard at that point. And, you know, I was jumping some ditches, you know, just getting a bit of air when I was carrying my 65-liter pack, and I could feel it getting almost to the very bottom. But that was a lot of weight on my back, so I think it felt really good. I actually really got used to riding with a big, heavy backpack on me. And the YZ suspension, it doesn't harshen up as quickly. You know, like this one feels really good until you start working it really hard, and then you feel the harshness when you start getting the bottom quicker. So but it is way better than what you'll find on the Hondas and the TTRs that are in this price range. Those are the main competitors for this bike, and this bike has much nicer suspension than those. Their bikes aren't adjustable either. Brakes, like I said, no issues. Engine, one complaint I have about it is that it bulges out the side a bit, but it's a 4-stroke 300, so it's kind of expected. But I did have a pretty bad spill going downhill on the rocks, and it cracked the clutch cover pretty bad, and that put the bike out of commission for a month because I had to buy a new clutch cover, and then I realized I needed to buy new needle bearings for inside and get that professionally installed because I didn't have the tools to do that. It's actually pretty hard to do, so I ended up making custom plates myself out of aluminum and sticking them onto the sides of the engine using 3M tape. And I won't be having a cracked cover anymore after that, so I would recommend doing this if you can, if you have the tools and stuff. The stock shifter is way too short, so what I ended up buying was a Yamaha Banshee shifter. They're pretty cheap to buy compared to most. I hear you can buy a Honda XR 650 shifter, which is a bit shorter, which is for people with big feet, it's perfect for the stock pegs. But the stock pegs are so bad on this bike that you should honestly be upgrading as soon as possible, because it's really uncomfortable riding with them. It even affects your riding stance. It affects your shifting, all that crap. So I bought these from Amazon. I've had no problems. They're actually built pretty well, and they're like the cheapest good pegs you can get. You're gonna have to reuse the hardware from your stock pegs to install these, but once you have these, then you won't need to cut down the Yamaha Banshee shifter, because I tried using the Yamaha Banshee shifter with my stock pegs, had to cut it down, then bought these pegs, then had to cut it, add length to it, weld it, and now it's good again. Now it feels natural again. So just skip that crap, get the pegs and the shifter at the same time. You won't have that problem if you have a size 11 boots or whatever. That's the size I'm running. So people with small feet probably won't have any of these issues, but I'm just saying. So you're gonna have to bend the shifter so that it fits around the engine right and looks right and stuff. No chafing. As you can see, I had done some grinding on this plate from when I had the shifter. I had it a little different when I had the stock pegs. So, but I wouldn't have needed to grind it as much if I had just bought the pegs and done the shifter at the same time. Anyway, so I've got radiator guards from Emperor Racing on here. I think they've definitely saved my radiators from taking some damage. And I've also got a skid plate by Emperor Racing. It required a bit of modification. Dremeled down this plate here because it was pushing up against the engine when I installed it, and that's never a good thing to have. You never want any chafing. And yeah, they weren't the easiest to install, these Emperor Racing mods, but I know they make the highest quality protection for dirt bikes, so I went with them. I also use their products on my YZ250X. I've got a skid plate from them. So like I said, I have a pair valve delete on this bike, so it will remove the tubing that runs around. It runs from the airbox up through here and then down into that little plate there, which is the block off plate provided by SmartMoto. They make a little kit for the pair valve delete, and that's what I went with because it's a really clean way to do it. You can do it yourself too if you don't want to spend any money by just pinching off the tubes and stuff, but I like to do it this way. It reduces clutter as well. So on this bike, when I bought it from the dealer, I asked the guy, what kind of coolant do you use in these things? Because with my Yamaha, it's Yamalube only, and they actually are using car coolant, and they've said they've never had an issue with it. So that's what I'm using, just standard 50-50 mix, you know, generic coolant that'll work with anything. I haven't had any issues with it, so whatever works, you know. Working our way to the back, got the stock muffler on here still, and thinking about possibly upgrading to a pro circuit muffler someday, maybe next season, who knows. This one looks a little restricted. It doesn't sound the best when you first buy it, but mine's broken in now, so it sounds decent. So yeah, you're gonna get a little more horsepower and throttle response out of it if you upgrade that. I've heard from like pretty much everyone who buys them, you know, the sound, the throttle response, the horsepower is very noticeable difference. Also, another mod that's very easy is you can buy a KDX 200 Snorkel and put it in there. Or I'm not sure if it's just the 200. I think it's pretty much all the KDXs. It's just KDX Snorkel. Put it in there, opens up the air for the air box a little, because the snorkel that's in there is very restrictive and you want to just get some more flow going. But first you got to get one of those chip tuners, or else you're going to be having it run even more lean, which you don't want that. So I'm doing those two things at the same time. I'm still waiting for my EJK tuner, but yeah, looking forward to that. Looking forward to a bit more punch and throttle response. One thing I really like about these bikes, they are really maintenance friendly. So very little maintenance required on this bike. You can do your research, but the intervals are just shockingly long, even for oil changes. And the airbox on this bike, it takes 4 times as long for the air filter to get dirty as it does on my YZ. But partly because, you know, there's a lot less airflow getting through there. But it'll still be really good even with the KDX Snorkel. Probably still about, you know, 4 times as long probably, because my YZ doesn't even have a snorkel to begin with, and it has 2 big slots in the number plate. So that thing is getting a lot of, you know, air and dust in there, as any motocross bike should. But this isn't a motocross bike, this is a trail bike. So, you know, maximum performance is not, you know, the priority with this bike. It's more of like rideability, ease of maintenance, and, you know, just getting out and enjoying the trails, not about having peak performance, which I'm totally fine with. I've got the peak performance over there. I can ride this thing, you know, if I want to just have a fun Sunday ride and take it easy, or go on an adventure, explore some things, go camping. Much better bike for that than my YZ. It can tractor up the hills really nicely. Like the YZ, you want to have it in the top half of the power, or it might be bogging if it's on the gnarly stuff. You want to really try to do that. Like, it can lug too, but nothing like a 4-stroke 300. Like, this is the best trail bike I've ever ridden, to be honest. Like, trail dedicated bike. It's like a tractor. Like I said, you can start from a dead stop in second, no problem. The gearing is perfect. You know, it's a 6-speed. It's nice having that extra gear. The top speed is really nice, 120 kilometers an hour. Can't complain. I'm totally happy with that. My YZ, it's got even taller gearing. Even though it's only a 5-speed, it can reach easily over 140 kilometers an hour. I had to tighten up the gearing on it by putting on a slightly bigger sprocket on it, because it was actually too tall for single track, you know, just idling around everywhere. But with this bike, I am really happy with the gearing. Just emphasis on that. And, you know, there's one issue that pops up sometimes, and this isn't too uncommon on dirt bikes, you know, especially Yamahas, where the bike likes to catch neutral. But with this bike, if you give it some extra oomph, you know, you really put some pressure on that with your boot when you're shifting, it's not going to hit neutral. So especially when you're shifting up. With the YZ, I find that it's when you try to shift down to first. With this bike, it's usually when you shift up to second. It likes to catch neutral, but just give it good extra oomph, should be okay. No problem getting over logs, like lifts the front wheel, no problem. Lots of torque down low, very linear power. All right, let's quickly talk about the tires. This bike has Dunlop Geomax MX52s. It's got the 100/118s, which is fairly skinny for a full-size bike. My YZ250X has Dunlop GMX AT81s, I believe, and then the 110/118, and those tires work really nice. In fact, I tried switching to my usual that was my go-to before, and ended up switching right back to the Dunlop GMX AT81s because really nice traction with those. These are good, but not great. I think if you put a wider tire on, you definitely would want to do some power upgrades before you put a wider rear tire on. So this bike, I find the stuff that it does better than the YZ, you know, riding at low speed over really gnarly terrain, it can hold that slow pace if you need to. When I went on my backpacking trip, there's a really long gnarly hill climb and lots of rocks and roots and steep gnarly technical stuff in the first, you know, half hour of the ride or whatever. And I don't think my YZ could have done it. With all that weight, it would have been really sketchy just throwing the bike into that stuff at faster speed to like keep the momentum. But with this bike, you can go into it with no momentum and it holds that speed, just tractors up it as long as you don't make any mistakes. Choose the right line. It did it great. And with the YZ, you just gotta battle it over that at a harder, faster speed. And you know, wearing a big 65-liter pack, that's just not an option, because if you go down, you're gonna break a bone doing that. But yeah, with or without a pack, I'd say the low speed, really gnarly, rocky stuff, this bike makes good traction on it, holds its pace, while the YZ, you gotta just battle it up. But the hill climbs that are longer with loose soil, definitely for the YZ, that thing, you can head into it at higher speed and just hold the speed going up the hill and make it to the top. But this bike, the weight's working against it and not able to make as good traction, maybe because of that rear tire not being as good. Also, the horsepower wasn't enough. Maybe it would be enough if I, you know, pulled some power out of it with the chip tuner as I'm going to, but it didn't have enough power to hold the gear and, you know, hold its speed going up the hills. Like those big, tall, sandy hill climbs, they're tough for this bike. If it's, you know, a medium length one, you can pull it off if you're good. But so yeah, single track bike does great. Feels pretty agile, especially for how heavy it is. No complaints there. It's just a really fun bike that you can get on a budget and get out on the trails with. And hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you plan on doing some of these upgrades, feel free to check out the tutorial I have on how to do the headlight, the key ignition, and the paravalve delete. Thanks for watching.